Hey, what's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome to a tech roundup for the F1 2018 Monaco Grand Prix. I know a little bit later in the week, it's on a Saturday rather than a Thursday or even the Friday. Obviously, Monaco, bit of a strange one, obviously very unique. We have practice on the Thursday, then there's a bank holiday on Friday. So I was going to post this video yesterday, but just did not have enough time to make it. So we're going to make it here just before qualifying. So still a bit relevant, and obviously still kind of interesting maybe to those of you who are looking forward to it. You know, even though we're kind of into the halfway stage of the weekend, it's still, relevant information that you guys might find interesting and kind of give you an insight, hopefully, to maybe why maybe a team might be doing a little bit better, or just generally giving an insight to Monaco, especially. Spain was quite a big one for the upgrades. Obviously, we had two videos there for McLaren alone and then other cars, but Monaco's pretty good as well. A lot of teams bring the higher downforce spec of their car, essentially. They put on what I think Paul Di Resta put it in practice was basically just kind of free drag, essentially. They don't need to worry about getting drag on the car because Monaco, the straights are so short and it's all pretty much corners that are dependent on downforce that it doesn't matter that they're going to create drag from creating downforce because it's Monaco. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to start off with the leading team at the moment, and the team that's a big question mark for this weekend, obviously, because they won the last race quite comfortably, but coming here at Monaco, they look to be a bit on the back foot, and we don't know exactly how they're going to do. I guess we'll see later today in qualifying, which is probably the most crucial part here in Monaco. But Mercedes, they brought these 6 different vortex generators in black, which is a little bit striking. So definitely they weren't trying to hide it or anything like that. If they were, they would have put it in chrome silver or whatever. But yeah, 6 vortex generators, kind of like the McLarens. Obviously, actually, if you look at the McLaren on the top of their side pod there, they've had those since the launch. And really, vortex generators on the top of the side pod, they kind of haven't been in fashion almost in Formula One for the last 2 years. Ever since the 2017 regulations have come in, it's been surprising that it doesn't seem to be a solution teams go for. It was very popular a lot before then, like from, I'm thinking 2011 all the way to 2016. I would say that a lot more teams than now ran vortex generators like this on the top of their side pods. But ever since they're able to do this whole upright that comes off the edge of the bargeboard area, they just haven't needed these vortex generators, I guess. But Mercedes, trying to eke out and squeeze out like you're squeezing an orange. What a metaphor there. But they're trying to eke out as much performance as they can from their new car, obviously, as we get kind of closer and closer with these top teams to maybe the edge of performance they're trying to find aerodynamically. So vortex generator, if you don't know what it is, essentially a little upright you can see here, sculpted as well with the Mercedes guys. So not only are they trying to smoothen the air out the top of the side pod, but they're also just trying to But they're also just trying to channel the flow of air to where they want it. You can see the way they've angled all of them is kind of a bit more to the outside of the side pod. So trying to maybe channel some air into more of the edge of the side pod rather than keeping it all on the top. But traditionally, a vortex generator is an upright on a surface like this, and it's there to induce mixing via the tip vortices that will kind of form on the edge of this tip. They'll spiral out and go downstream, and the mixing of this air is going to try and energize the air in the boundary layer, in the areas where the air starts to become turbulent. Hopefully that energizing is going to encourage the air to stay more attached to the surface of which the upright is attached to. So in this case, the top of the side pod, they're trying to keep the air as attached as possible to the side pod area. But at the same time, like I said, they've also sculpted it in a way where they're also controlling the flow. So it looks like they're trying to get it attached, but perhaps trying to also force it to the kind of downwards part of the side pod, maybe trying to meet up with the air they've got working from the end plate of the side pod and the bargeboard area where it kind of moves and kind of gets chucked around the side pod area. Maybe they're trying to join that air up because, if they wanted to just simply attach it to the top face, they would just pretty much have flat vortex generators that are just kind of perpendicular and just, flat to the oncoming air. And we've seen that before. That's the kind of style of vortex generator we are used to before pre-2017. It would just be very flat and would just be there to make the air as smooth as possible on the top. But now, with McLaren and now with Mercedes, the way the teams are bringing it in now, it's kind of working in conjunction with the bargeboard area, I guess, to try and just get as much air flowing around the side of the actual side pod rather than the very top surface, which makes sense. That's a very crucial area with the floors getting more and more complex as the years go on, and that area, that squirts a lot of area between the rear tire and the diffuser, that getting so important every single year pretty much. It's no surprise, but also for me, kind of just thinking thinking about it, is kind of weirdly a bit surprising that no teams really, not too many, use vortex generators anymore. They just go for these kind of upright winglet solutions, which is kind of odd because I guess, you think just more efficiency in that area would be great, but I guess, teams have more important areas to research and develop in, and that's what I'm talking about. Mercedes, the top of the pecking order, they have the time, they have the money to try and eke out as much efficiency as they can in these areas. Moving on to Toro Rosso here, really interesting bargeboard area for Toro Rosso. Now, a lot of this is not new from, they've had this since Bahrain, the kind of slot gaps in the bargeboard and the kind of the array they've got, the dagger solution at the front face of this entire bargeboard area. But different little things is this kind of winglet. They've had that already, but the way they've now treated it for Monaco, you can see if you look closer, you've got slot gaps, 1, 2, 3, 4 slot gaps in this winglet now, and they're kind of sculpted in a way where it's kind of creating 4 different arrays of wings that are all kind of merging into one another right at the edge when it meets the chassis. So they've kind of edited that winglet they've had since the start of the season, and the way they also get around it, which is, it's nothing to do with aerodynamics, it's just a clever way the teams can actually do this and make it legal. You can see over here they've got some slots that line up also with this dagger solution here. So the way they've done it is, if you look at it from bird's eye view, the gap that these winglets create go all the way down through this slot gap, through the dagger, and so it's one complete continuous slot down bird's eye view, because the rule is they're not allowed to have just a hole or a slot that then has a bit of bodywork underneath, so it has to go completely through, so that when you look at it from bird's eye, it's not like a hole, essentially. It's a continuous kind of shape almost of the car that comes through, and it's something that Williams have kind of done from the start of the season to kind of get away with what they're doing, and it's the same sort of thing that Toro Rosso are also doing to try and kind of manipulate the rules to the best way they can work it, because they wanted to obviously do this with a winglet. Obviously advantageous to have slot gaps, accelerating the air through that slot gap as well is advantageous to them, and obviously just playing around with the air at the very top phase, you can see lined up with the rest of the side pod there, so that's going to be an important area. So to get that upgrade on the car, Toro Rosso have had to tweak the other winglets they've got to try and line them up and get these slot gaps lined up so it's legal. Also, just to note in general, the Toro Rosso is actually looking pretty damn interesting around this area, and I would suspect, hopefully, or for their sake, they're going to be developing this area of the M-plate side pod and kind of hopefully going for that kind of classic 3 or 4 array pronged uprights here as they go along. They've already kind of developed that since the launch of the car. It was just 1 upright, they've now gone for 2, so hopefully they can continue that development process. But you can see that nice little, due to the lighting here at Monaco, actually really nice with the lights, you can see the kind of kink in the side pod here, and the way this winglet is kinking down instead of the kind of more natural swoop of the Mercedes car and stuff like that. So kind of nice little area, and definitely Toro Rosso is, for me, it's never been a all-inspiring car in years gone by, but the Toro Rosso this year is becoming a very interesting car to actually look at aerodynamically, let alone delivery-wise. Just so you guys can get a little better look of that winglet there, so you can see the different 4-pronged array. This one a little bit bigger than the other 3 slots there, but that's the winglet they've adapted for the Monaco Grand Prix. And here's a look at that leading edge of the floor in the bargeboard area. You can see the slot gaps I told you about that are going to be lined up with the winglet at the top, and you can see the really nice detailing here down at the bottom with the actual daggers on the leading edge of the floor. Another team that's good to see they're developing is Sauber Alfa Romeo, with this extra winglet on either side of their chassis on the front here. So very much kind of almost along the lines of the Mercedes, the Williams, the Red Bull, but this one being a little bit lower than those teams, because those teams kind of use this winglet that expands out and reaches out to connect to the bargeboard, whereas Sauber have just got this winglet that sort of, I guess you could say, connects to this area of the bargeboard they've got going on. But obviously Sauber never had a huge, amazing structure for a bargeboard and an end plate with a side pod, so this is just a little bit lower to kind of work with that. And again, with slots there as well, those just to play around with the air, but we'll have a better angle of it from top down. Little bit of a blurry picture, but that's the winglet right there. They already had this one since the launch of the car, but now you can see that very, from this angle, very clearly kind of inspired from Mercedes and Williams. But this is what I'm talking about. It's very low and doesn't actually reach out too far, because this entire area for Sauber hasn't been developed as much as other teams. So I would suspect that this will be in tandem with the bargeboard area, and the end plates to the side pods will be getting developed, hopefully for their sake, throughout the season, because it's really good to see Sauber. They've already scored 2 points with Leclerc and Ericsson. They've already scored 3 times, actually, I should say. Bahrain, Baku, obviously, and then the last one also at Spain. So it's good to see that Sauber actually, continuing to make this step. We said it in the podcast before that, we hope they'd make this step to kind of close up to the midfield, and it's good to see that so far they are there pretty much in and I hope they continue to develop for their sake and just for the sake of F1. It's always good. It's never great to just see a back marker so far off the pace, and also for the sake of the team, they've had a lot of hard years, so it's good to see that things are coming good for them. Take a look at Force India now. They've come to Monaco with a much more complex lower T-wing here. Obviously, the upper T-wing has been banned since the 2018 regulations, but teams have been going with the lower T-wing now. That's just above the exhaust exit there. So Force India going for a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of slot array there with a double-edged lower T-wing, and so obviously a bit of a higher downforce spec essentially for Monaco. They potentially may just keep that, although for the rest of the season, obviously Force India with the Mercedes engine, they can probably afford a little bit of drag maybe from this area, but this is going to be working in tandem with the rear wing and also trying to help sculpt any kind of exhaust gases coming out of the exhaust tailpipe. But the general case of the lower T-wings working with the rear wing in tandem to try and create a good upwash and just generally a better pressure differential on the area of the car to try and sucker down the car to obviously get the downforce they need at the rear end, which is probably one of the most important areas of the car, obviously. But Force India, not only with the lower T-wing, but also they've sculpted the rear end of their car a little bit differently to maybe work with the lower T-wing and just generally maybe get better airflow in the rear end. A little bit tricky to see from this angle of the car, but if I kind of move this picture up a little bit here, so where my mouse is essentially, you can see the silver part of the car that swoops down and curves down. That curve is a lot more aggressive and basically has been suckered in a lot more than it previously was in the previous Grand Prix and the entire season. So looks like they've done some work, maybe doing some good work of like maybe moving some components around or just generally being a bit more efficient with the bodywork and trying to sucker that in, but that essentially allowing and opening up more space for the air essentially to move through. And the way they've sculpted it also is kind of almost like a little bit of a scoop kind of hand that's going to cut that's going to encourage the air to swoop down in that area, which is just below the T-wing and the entire T-wing area, and so trying to work that in. So not only the T-wing itself, but hand in hand comes in some bodywork upgrades as well for Monaco. Red Bull Racing also trying to manipulate the lower T-wing area as much as they can, so they've gone with two different ones. They previously just had one going around this area, so they've got one attached to the actual pylon that goes up for the DRS system, and then one that's actually onto the chassis here. But the Red Bull, I always find it fascinating. They have some really great kind of car body details. Just the way the car is sculpted in this way. There's a little divot here, the way this just seamlessly blends into the lower T-wing, whereas other teams kind of almost looks like they have to strap on the lower T-wing with a nut and bolt, whereas this kind of just sculpts in and blends in very nicely. So I've always been appreciative of Red Bull there, but yeah, Red Bull, obviously they're looking very strong, and it's going to be just like a couple hours before qualifying here when I post this video, so I think they're going to look pretty damn strong around here. Obviously Red Bull known for downforce, and unlike other races, they don't have to compromise this race on their chassis. They can just go on with the full downforce they have always wanted to run, but every single race they have to run some sort of compromise, apart from this race where they can just go with the full downforce spec of the Red Bull. So in an ideal world, if Red Bull had the straight line speed of the Mercedes car or the Ferrari, I guess the Monaco spec would pretty much be the spec they'd want to run at every race if they had the power to match and they didn't have to worry about drag every single race. But yeah, Red Bull continuing on. Obviously every team has brought on the higher downforce spec of their rear wing, obviously the maximum angle they can get away with the rear wing, and obviously Red Bull working in tandem with that is bringing in some new developments on the T-wing. Continuing on talks of the lower T-wing, McLaren bring a much bigger lower T-wing to this to the Monaco Grand Prix for their car there. You can see the rear wing, nothing too new actually about their rear wing. They've had this very complex wing since launch, but again, you can just kind of tell the higher angle of the rear wing, but very long lower T-wing compared to other teams. Red Bull going for a little bit of a shorter solution, but McLaren going for a higher up compared to other teams. Obviously Force India was around here at this height, McLaren going for this height here, so clearly definitely working a lot more with the rear wing, trying to create that upwash effect a lot better. Going to Ferrari, obviously from the Spanish Grand Prix, their mirror solution was made illegal, so they no longer have the upper fairing here, they just have the lower one, so kind of confirms to us that that was kind of BS from Ferrari if they were going to try and argue that that top fairing was structurally integral, because clearly it's very structurally integral already with just one. So that definitely was a kind of cause for maybe the FIA to call it illegal, due to the fact that it was just straight up, it wasn't needed as a structural thing, it was just there for pure aerodynamics, which obviously the halo was not brought in for that sake. Obviously there's other arguments in terms of, it was just all the teams complaining, and it only took Ferrari to do it for the teams to kind of bring it up, but there you go. So Ferrari bringing a different solution for the Monaco Grand Prix, but they're still opting for the mirrors on the top top of the halo, because obviously they can get it at a bit of a different height, perhaps, to when they had it coming out of the car. This is actually the panel, maybe, that they had the original mirrors coming out, so they kind of just got an unbolt solution to kind of cover that panel up. But also, it's advantageous maybe just to have this upright coming through. That will obviously manipulate the air and maybe conjoin with the way they've shaped the halo towards the kind of trailing edge. Maybe it's going to be advantageous, but Ferrari wouldn't do it if it wasn't going to be advantageous in some sort of way. And staying on the subject of Ferrari, just a look at the really nice detailing on the bargeboard and the floor area of the Ferrari since the Spanish Grand Prix. They changed this up and got it a bit more complex, and obviously having the Monaco spec, as many dagger in kind of slots as you want in the floor, just trying to get as much manipulation as they can for the air for underneath on the under tray, on the floor of the car, or around on the top face, trying to move it around on the bargeboard area and eventually to the side of the car to eventually the rear. And finally, for the American outfit, the top one being the Monaco spec and the bottom one being the Spanish Grand Prix spec. You can see the clear difference, the amount of more sculpture going on here for the Monaco spec, and also the slot gaps also for the actual flaps they've got on the front wings. So you can just see a bit more of a visual representation on the face of it, what Monaco means basically for the teams in terms of just bringing that higher downforce spec to the car. And really finally, just to wrap up the video, just a few little details. The Renault, they've brought a bit more of a complex floor and kind of continuing on from the tweaks they're making for the Spanish Grand Prix, but nothing really major for the French outfit. In all honesty, at least that I've seen that's been pointed out online, just pretty much the floor detail was there for Renault. And also just finally for the Mercedes guys, just a nice shot of the detailing on the actual brake duct there. You can see the complexity. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different winglets on the actual brake system itself, so that's something that's going to be outlawed for the 2019 regulations. And I would think, personally, for me, I would agree with this part for 100% for the regulations of 2019. I don't see why. Obviously, I see why the teams are doing it, but in theory, I think it's going to be a good thing for them to outlaw it. It should just be a brake duct rather than an aerodynamic device, and it's one of the many reasons why, dirty air is so difficult to kind of contend with, because all these devices of aero are going to be affected in a negative way when you get dirty, hot exhaust gases coming off the back of a car you're following. So yeah, guys, that's been the tech roundup then for the Monaco Grand Prix. If you did find it interesting and informative, then do hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you are new around here, do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. We will have obviously some more videos surrounding the Monaco Grand Prix coming up later today and tomorrow, obviously, with the top 5 moments of the Monaco Grand Prix. But looking forward to qualifying. Obviously, one of the most exciting qualifyings, or if not the most exciting qualifying of the year, usually at Monaco. It's all about Saturday, really, rather than Sunday. So looking forward to that. Hope you guys are as well, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.